Alien Romulus just released in theaters this past weekend, and I actually have a very interesting perspective on this movie. The reason I have that perspective is because I don't have any real connection to this Alien franchise. That's not to say I dislike this franchise. I haven't actually watched most of this franchise. I have seen Alien Covenant, I have seen Prometheus, and I have seen the first Alien film, but I don't remember seeing it. I was fairly young, I'd guess 11 or 12 when I saw that movie. Thus, I just don't have a connection to it. So there are people who are just, so pure about the canon and decision making that goes on in Aliens, and specifically this new Alien Romulus movie, that I just don't have. I'm not going to bring that perspective into this review, which I think makes it a fairly unique review. I'm going to be talking about this idea of Alien Romulus as this almost reboot / restructuring into this Alien franchise that has laid dormant for probably about 6 or 7 years now, bringing it back to a modern audience and how it is successful and where it's not successful. Alien Romulus, for those who do not know, it takes place between the first film and the second film. It's the basic premise. I look here on 20th Century Studios website. They literally say Alien Romulus. It takes Alien franchise back to its root. And what it is you have these space pirates, essentially, these group of young space colonizers who's come face to face with the most terrifying life form in the universe, the xenomorph. And essentially this movie plays out like a haunted house movie. They are exploring this abandoned ship, and on this abandoned ship, there are xenomorphs. And now you're in this, fight to survive. That is essentially the movie. This film stars Cailee Spaeny from Priscilla and Civil War earlier this year. It also stars David Jonsson, an actor who I saw in a film last year called Ryan Lane. A few other notable cast members: Isabela Merced, directed by Fede Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead reboot in 2013, and Don't Breathe. This is as it's described again, a horror, science fiction, suspense thriller. Like, those are the genres that this movie is playing with. And this movie has noticeable callbacks. So noticeable that me, not knowing this franchise, was able to clearly articulate where some of those certain callbacks are, or where this film repeats itself. I've heard some people criticize this film as way too much of a rehash, think similar to The Force Awakens. Again, I can't say that perspective because I just don't have that attachment or knowledge of the series as a whole. However, there are beats in this film that are very familiar just due to the famous iconography that is the Alien franchise. One aspect that I really just want to start off the bat praising is the performances of Cailee Spaeny and David Jonsson. They are both really good. Cailee Spaeny just continues to impress me as a young actress. I have liked basically every decision she has made the past few years, and I think we're going to look back in a few years and be like, wow, this is a really talented young actress. I think we're going to look back in a few years and be like, wow, Cailee Spaeny is such a successful actress. Isn't it crazy that she's in Alien Romulus? And I think the same is going to be true with David Jonsson, who I kind of think just walks away with this movie. I thought Jonsson was fantastic, and he plays the android of this movie. All these Alien movies typically have one of these types of characters. Michael Fassbender plays it in Alien Covenant. He is really good. Jonsson is a really good actor in this movie, especially as this character develops and this performance changes. You think the character is going to be one thing in the movie, and then it takes a drastic turn for the rest of the movie. And to be honest, when that drastic change happens, and you'll know what it is when the movie happens, when that happens with the Jonsson character, I think this movie starts picking up pace, because for the first 20, 25, 30 minutes of this movie, I was kind of bored. I wasn't really engaged in it. I didn't care about these characters. This film suffers from the fact of these are a bunch of, for the most part, really no-name actors. If your most famous actor is Cailee Spaeny, then it's a pretty unknown cast. And the issue with that is this Alien franchise has never given a ton of development to everyone in the film that is not the main ensemble of the cast. Some of them get moments, but a lot of it is you're getting archetypal characters. And when you don't have a relationship with these characters to begin with, it makes a few of the characters seem very clearly disposable in this movie, and you know who's going to be the focal point of this movie. Alien Romulus certainly struggles with this. I think the way to fix this was to, and maybe it just wasn't plausible, I think one or two more bigger A-list actors, and even not A-list, but far more recognizable names, could have really done wonders for this movie and given it a little bit more just excitement around the fringes of this movie. And I think let's talk about Fede Alvarez, because I think he is a really talented director of action. And I think what he does so well is he's such a visceral filmmaker. When the film goes crazy, that's when Fede Alvarez is at his best. This is a character that's 2013 Evil Dead movie. In some scenes makes the original one look calm. Like, this is a guy who can just kind of go balls to the wall crazy. When Alien Romulus just goes crazy, it's pretty exciting. There are scenes of action and horror and suspense in this movie that are bar none. They're some of the most exciting set pieces you'll see in this movie. And it's largely due to Fede Alvarez's direction. His understanding of scope and scale in this movie, I thought, was pretty exciting for Alien Romulus. And I think that is where the film works the best, is when it is Fede Alvarez taking what he knows best as a horror director and bringing it into this genre, bringing it into this Aliens franchise, and just injecting a new sense of life and excitement into this series that has been, again, not dormant, because it certainly had sequels, but has definitely been, to some people, a case of diminishing returns. I think this film is far more back to basics, and some people are going to like that. Personally, for me, I didn't like that decision. I struggled with this film just kind of going back to basics of just the full acceptance of being a genre film. The reason I struggled with this going back to essentially what the first Alien movie is, going back to that iconography, going back to the nostalgia of the first film, is that I just didn't find it to pay off in any real way. The reason I didn't find it to pay off is just simply put, I didn't think the storytelling in this movie was all that compelling. I found this movie very generic in its story structure. I kind of knew where this movie was going from when the actions with the xenomorph starts to where it ends. It's not that I view the Alien franchise as religious text. I don't have that connection, but I do know Alien, the franchise, as one of the most important standing franchise / most important films ever made of the 20th century. Like, I do have that relationship with it because it's just so famous. It's so iconic. You don't even need to watch it to just know some of the beats of this movie. And thus, when I'm kind of watching it be repetitive to myself, and I'm like, really? Like, this is the way this story is going to choose to tell itself, and the decisions and the certain callbacks that this movie makes? I kind of thought it was boring, and that's when it didn't feel fresh and exciting. And I wish Fede Alvarez got the chance to detach it more from this history. And it does have that issue where it does feel like it is trying to replicate a feeling. And that's not necessarily exciting for me, because there are scenes in Alien Romulus where it doesn't have that. There are scenes in this movie where it feels like a director getting to do his own thing. There are moments in this movie where the action is so visceral and exciting and so different from how Ridley Scott and James Cameron direct movies just in general, that I'm like, oh, okay, this is an approach that obviously has callbacks to the 1970s Alien movie, but is doing its own thing. It's telling its own story. And when it does that, it's successful. But the issue is, for most of the runtime, I think it gets away from that. And that bothered me as a watcher of this film. Now, when Alien Romulus is just xenomorphs killing people and bursting out of people's chest, this movie is like viscerally so engaging, upsetting, and exciting. That's when this movie works best. Kind of wanted that to be more of the movie, because the issue is, when you're taking this idea, bringing this franchise back to its roots, and you're trying to strip, all the mythology, all the complications that Ridley Scott made with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, some of the big brain ideas that he's trying to achieve, and you're trying to bring it back to its most basic, primitive form, which is aliens are trying to kill people and they're bursting out of their chest. Isn't this really gory and scary? But then you have a little bit of callbacks to other films that come later, other connections to this series, and you have that in this movie. It just didn't work because I didn't find this film to be intellectually engaging, which I think that's what Prometheus and Alien Covenant do so well. Those films I find intellectually engaging. And thus it's a disappointment for me when I'm watching this film and being like, okay, you were trying to revert it back to something at its most purest form as you see it, as you have laid it out to be. But yet you're bringing in ideas from other of the films. You're trying to occasionally tackle something a little deeper, but you're not doing it with any substance because you yourself have kind of put these barriers up for yourself where you're like, well, we're not going to really go there. We really don't want to get complicated. Then just don't have those elements in this movie. By the end of this movie, I was kind of just numb watching it. I enjoyed it. I think the third act is by far the best part of this movie, especially when it comes to action and horror. But by the end, I didn't care about any of these characters. I cared about some of the performers. I think Spaeny's really good, and I think Jonsson really impressed me. But I can't say I cared about their characters at all in this movie. And that's a huge disappointment. And by the end, like I said, this was an okay film. I enjoyed it. I'd recommend you seeing it in theaters. And I have a feeling that maybe people who do have a love for this franchise, I've seen the divisiveness, and I think that's going to grow even more. So that's how I feel about it. That's my review. Alien Romulus, 2.5 stars out of 5 stars for me. Thank you all for watching. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more.